Should you be worried about the Elder Scrolls 6? It seems like now, more than ever, fans are concerned about what's coming next from Bethesda, with many people just assuming that the Elder Scrolls 6 won't deliver, and apparently even some Bethesda devs have somewhat shared this perspective. But is this reality? Should we actually be worried about what will happen with the Elder Scrolls 6? In this video, I want to share my own thoughts on this one, because I do think I can provide a bit of a different perspective. But even further, we have been hearing about some of this from more informed parties, like the lead designer on Skyrim weighing in. Things with the Elder Scrolls 6 have always been a bit weird. It was announced over 6 years ago now, at the time largely just to reassure fans that, yeah, Bethesda was still going to work on single-player games, even with Fallout 76 coming next. And while for a long time there was just this constant hunger for more news and details on TES 6, or hey, even a release date, following the initial release of Starfield, things definitely took a turn, as it became clear that Starfield wasn't connecting with audiences as much as some of the critics. Concerns over the Elder Scrolls 6 began popping up and really turned into a massive talking point. You could find a ton of posts about this. But for better or for worse, things after that largely subsided. We had the Fallout TV show, and even Fallout 76 started to make a resurgence. Seems like things weren't all that bad at Bethesda Game Studios. I mean, hey, at one point it even looked like Starfield might make a comeback with broader gaming audiences thanks to Shattered Space. Bethesda going back to that handcrafted map and reacting to fan feedback, but now here we are, just a couple of weeks removed from Shattered Space's release, and no, the comeback definitely didn't happen, and I would say now fans are asking more than ever if we should start getting worried about what's to come next from Bethesda. And for quite a few fans out there, this isn't even really a discussion anymore. It's not should I be worried for the Elder Scrolls 6, it's they've lost all hope Bethesda will deliver. And right off the bat, I do think it's important to acknowledge that, yeah, that's a sane take. I don't necessarily agree with the complete loss of hope, as you'll see laid out in this video, but given the last year, or really several from Bethesda, I think it's fair to be concerned over the next major title. Fallout 4 disappointed a ton of fans around release. Over the years, its reputation has definitely improved, but people still definitely haven't forgotten about the Creation Club. Fallout 76 has thankfully made a comeback, but definitely launched with its fair share of problems. To me, it's pretty clear that Fallout 76 just wasn't ready for release, but Bethesda chose to sell it to us anyway, and things like Fallout First and other Atomic Shop shenanigans didn't help things either, although honestly, each one of those feels relatively minor. I think the major concerns around the Elder Scrolls 6 really only bloomed after Starfield came out. I think what a lot of people forget is Starfield initially was enjoyed by a ton of people. The critic reviews for this game were good, and during its debut on Steam, things were pretty positive. But then, over the first couple of weeks, many fans simply hit a wall. So now I personally think it's largely due to some of the excess fast traveling in Starfield, as well as some of the underbaked features. Playing this game just gets old a bit faster compared to some of the past ones, and as such, we started to see reviews begin to decline. After that, we saw the Fallout 4 Next Gen update. Core parts of the update didn't even work on release, and for months now, Fallout 4 has just been left in a far more broken state for many. And of course, Shattered Space coming out, and just not really feeling big enough or even deep enough for a lot of people. What was thought to be Bethesda's comeback moment felt a lot more like business as usual without much in the way of improvements for many out there. And honestly, it's not even just the fact that Starfield didn't deliver. I think Bethesda's perceived lack of acknowledgement of fan complaints really did a lot of damage here. Regardless of how you personally feel about Starfield, it's undeniable at this point that a ton of players out there want Bethesda to go in a different direction after both Fallout 76 and Starfield, which of course many players felt was a step down compared to Skyrim in particular. And while yes, we do have Bethesda Game Studios releasing Shattered Space with this beautiful handcrafted map as a response to some of the initial Starfield pushback, right around the same time, they're still calling Starfield one of their big 3 games, which of course is giving many of these disappointed fans pause. Because, yeah, a lot of people didn't enjoy this content and want to see better. But following the mostly negative reviews for Shattered Space, headlines went out with how Bethesda views Starfield as one of their best games ever. And while, yeah, in context, this is more in terms of technical achievement, it still, of course, isn't going to appease those frustrated fans who have been waiting for their next game for a while now. And I think this honestly explains a lot of how we got to the current situation, again, with so much fan concern over the Elder Scrolls 6. I think Shattered Space and the Fallout 4 Next Gen update, two things that really could have turned things around or just improved things with those games, in reality did a lot of damage to the brand overall and genuinely impacted how people view this company and where they see it going next. But I also genuinely believe a ton of this is going to dissipate and just kind of blow over. I think Bethesda will be fine here. The thing with Starfield is that it would probably be considered a mostly fine or okay game, largely on Fallout 4's level, if the game was literally just rearranged and exploration was a major gameplay focus. I think a lot of the actual questing content in Starfield, which feels a bit dated at times for sure, but I think for a lot of fans would still be perfectly fine if it was concentrated into a few set locations. Shattered Space almost got us there. The initial hours of that DLC really did feel like a return to form, but as you dove into it a bit more, things simply felt too small from Shattered Space. Starfield, conversely, is massive. It feels like a massive universe, but it almost has the opposite problem, where everything is so big and so spread out and disconnected that it hampers the overall experience. Starfield still has some design issues, and the writing is definitely not the best ever for Bethesda, but I do genuinely think if the content was just kind of rearranged and more concentrated, with a lot less fast travel and way more on foot or even now vehicle exploration, Starfield would be a Fallout 4-esque good enough game that isn't peak Bethesda, but can kind of scratch that same itch. Because the simple reality is, even as we now approach a decade-and-a-half wait for the next Elder Scrolls game, there really isn't anything else out there that scratches the same itch that these games do. So I think when it comes to some of their titles, like Starfield, Fallout 4, and likely looking ahead to the Elder Scrolls 6, due to their unique genre and how many people absolutely love this style of game, they kind of become a good enough experience for many. They don't have to blow things away for a lot of fans to be pretty happy with the product. And to be clear, this is not me being aspirational. I don't think things ought to be that way. I just think that's how things are. And I think one of the pretty crazy parts about this is, especially when it comes to Starfield's exploration, Bethesda kind of recognized this. Bruce Nesmith, the design director on Skyrim, who has now left Bethesda, recently spoke about filling planets as one of the biggest design challenges when it came to Starfield.
For the project, it was definitely how to fill the planets. And if you read the criticisms, they only partially succeeded on that. But that was definitely the hard thing to do. Is there's a lot of empty planets out there, and you got to have something for players to do on them. And to be fair, there's plenty to do on them. It just isn't what the players were hoping to have to do on them. That was the disconnect there.
And there's two main things that give me hope on this front. First off, Bethesda of course recognizes this is an issue. We hear about it from Bruce Nesmith here, but also Shattered Space itself was built in a different way because Bethesda recognized this feedback. But we further hear from Bruce Nesmith how Bethesda's management was also better about feedback during Starfield's development, which is definitely a good sign.
I do think the criticisms of the game were fair. Some of them were brought to management while we were in process. But unlike 76, management acknowledged them, but sometimes you're kind of stuck. You have deadlines and you just have to do something, and it's too late to make the counter reactions you need to make. So you try to do the best you can with what you have, and I think they ended up in some of that territory.
So with that in mind, as we look ahead at the Elder Scrolls 6, I definitely feel a bit more hopeful than most other fans out there. Not that this is going to be Game of the Year, but that Bethesda will at least address some of the major mistakes from Fallout 76 and Starfield when it comes to the Elder Scrolls 6. I think we have a situation right now where Bethesda isn't saying what fans want to hear. They're not condemning Starfield and being vocal about moving in a new direction once they're done with this game. But Bethesda has never been particularly vocal about feedback. To me, it's one of the company's major weak points, and thankfully, when it comes to the Elder Scrolls 6, a lot of the fan complaints from Starfield just won't really be an issue here. There won't be this weird fast travel based exploration because that's just not how it works with the Elder Scrolls 6. I honestly think things will just look better because so much of the Elder Scrolls 6 will be using blueprints from Skyrim, using blueprints of what worked from their past games, and yeah, fans tend to like a lot of those features. And I think in a weird way, expectations may end up even working out in Bethesda's favor here. Bruce Nesmith Nesmith talks a bit about this as well. If your child shows you a crudely drawn picture, you might praise it and think it's great work. But if your lead artist comes back with the exact same piece, you would of course be incredibly disappointed. The only difference between those two pieces is your expectations from the author. To me, it really feels like fan expectations for the Elder Scrolls 6 are lowered. Lots of people are worried about this game. So Bethesda delivers something that's just good enough, that looks pretty good, and like it is a spiritual successor to Skyrim, expanding on many of the core ideas from that game. I think that'll check a lot of boxes for a lot of people, and their interest will be reignited. I feel like there is a larger narrative building that people are going to turn away from Bethesda now. After Fallout 76 and Starfield, things have just gone a little bit too far, but let's also not forget, Fallout 76 had a far more controversial release compared to Starfield. Starfield became a platform exclusive and still launched as the biggest Bethesda release ever. Whether you want to blame that on Game Pass or something else, but yeah, a ton of people were still interested in this game even after Fallout 76. Well, maybe you personally will have your own set of concerns around the Elder Scrolls 6. I think gaming overall will still be incredibly excited once we get that first real trailer. And yeah, I think this is a bit of a sad reality, but I genuinely believe lots of gamers just want an updated Skyrim with a couple of new stories to tell, and Bethesda crossing that barrier will be enough for a lot of people. I would still expect a lot of the nonsense in this next game. It's going to have microtransactions, you'll likely be able to pay extra money to play this one a bit early. It'll probably have a bunch of purchasable skins in-game, but as long as the game's pretty good, will any of that really matter? Fallout 4 sold really well, and Starfield followed up Fallout 76 like I just mentioned, so I can't imagine some of this nonsense will really turn players away completely. The engine has also been a major talking point with all of this. Many fans want Bethesda to switch engines at this point, and we hear Bruce Nesmith weigh in on this as well. Gamebryo is no longer a business. It hasn't been for a while. Gamebryo is what Creation Engine is based off of, but that isn't the entire story. He does continue on to say, but that engine has been constantly tweaked, updated, and refined to do exactly the kinds of games Bethesda makes. The Elder Scrolls, the Fallouts, and Starfield. It's perfectly tuned to that kind of game. And switching, overall, I think a lot of the issues Bethesda ran into with their last two games really came out of trying something new, and some of the growing pains that come from that. I think this company has made some massive mistakes over the past few years, and I've definitely had a changed view of them as a result. But as we do look ahead to the Elder Scrolls 6, I still feel pretty confident that it'll have a way to pay for early access and way too many microtransactions, but that core game will be pretty similar to past ones with some optimizations and updates here and there, and I think for the vast majority of gamers out there, that's enough. I think as they switch to some of their mainline franchises, the guardrails will go back up for Bethesda Game Studios, and I think that's probably where they're going to perform the best, where some of the best content will come out of. I don't necessarily think the Elder Scrolls 6 will be a Game of the Year contender or anything even remotely like that. Bethesda hasn't been there for well over a decade now, but for those of you concerned that the Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be a complete disaster, I don't personally think you need to feel that way.